Hello, everyone. I hope you're doing well. A few days ago, I was in a discussion with a prominent science communicator named Harrison Duran, who is involved in a lot of paleontology science communication and does work on the advisory board for a company known as Colossal Biosciences, who claim to be involved in an assortment of de-extinction programs, which, in a mutual Discord server we're a part of, caused a very turbulent discussion, with different science communicators either being pro-colossal or very much anti-colossal, or at the very least skeptical to the extreme that colossal actually are doing the work they say they're doing. So, Harrison offered to have a discussion with several of us about what Colossal is doing, and I went in from a place of extreme skepticism. In retrospect, there are several questions that I wish I had asked during this conversation, but didn't come to my mind at the time, though I did get through 2 pages worth of written questions. So I hope you'll find this discussion interesting and learn a lot from it. You may at the very least know Colossal Biosciences as the company that is planning to bring back the mammoth, the dodo, and the thylacine from extinction. So there is some potentially exciting stuff coming from this company, though I do have some serious ethical questions, even if their science is up to scruff. So anyway, let's get on to the discussion. I'm struggling to work out which question to ask first because I have 2 full pages full of questions.
Yeah. Well, I guess I'll just kind of introduce myself if that's...
Yeah, please do. Please do.
Right,
I'm screen recording and I'll probably turn this into a video. So please do introduce yourself to the audience of Geodac Geoscience.
Yeah, so my name's Harrison Duran. I'm a paleontologist based out of Spearfish, South Dakota, in the United States. And I primarily work in the private sector. And I have in various rock formations across the American West, primarily in the Hell Creek Formation of South Dakota. So that would be the late Cretaceous or the latest of the Cretaceous. Different species that I excavate and prepare in my fossil lab would be Triceratops, mainly Edmontosaurus, Tyrannosaurus rex, Pachycephalosaurus, and all the various fauna that existed in the Hell Creek Formation, as well as turtles too.
Oh, awesome!
Yes, all the big dinosaurs, and then turtles with some forthcoming publication on that. So, kind of some exciting research in the near future. But I've also worked as a consultant for museums to help establish prep labs or to guide and advise on the preparation of certain specimens. One of those being an American mastodon preparation at the Virginia Living Museum. So that was a thing where I acted as a contracted consultant for, and then the other big stuff that I do is as a public educator is I make content on TikTok and Instagram, and I film my work in the private sector, from excavating, prospecting fossils, the various science and the things about what I do, and aspects of the field, whether it's fossil preparation or excavation, and then eventually in the near future publishing. So that is the bulk of my work, is being a videographer and documenting all of my paleontological work.
That's really, really cool. For anyone watching / listening, I'll attach links to all of Harrison's socials so you can go and follow him. I want to start off by talking about the uncertainty I have regarding what you talked about regarding genetic diversity and how Colossal are adding genes to already existing threatened species. You were talking about the fact they were planning on doing this with, I believe you said bison. Feel free to correct me on this. I was wondering, where do these genes sort of come from? Is there a risk of damaging effectively what it means for an individual to be of that species and disrupting and changing how that species evolves? And if those species come from extinct populations, does that make these bison that are born as a result of these genetic modifications more susceptible to whatever those populations died out from. Particularly thinking because obviously of climate change and permafrost melting, you could have the reopening of diseases that older populations might not have been resistant to and might have gone extinct because of.
Mm-hmm. Yes, it's a great question, and it's a great question for genomicists. That's a very genomics based question where some people study, what do the genes actually do? If you're inserting certain genes into a population, is that going to have off target effects in the genome? Is that going to, as you say, introduce susceptibility to certain things? Well, with the story of the bison, or the colloquial name, the American buffalo, with the story of that's from the first Europeans arriving to North America, and then there were about maybe like 60 to 80 million buffalo on the continent, and then by 1900 there were fewer than 1,000. So in the case of the buffalo, it was merely a pretty much effectively just shooting all of them. It was just mass shooting of tens of millions. There were fur trades. Buffalo tongues in Europe became a delicacy, which affected stuff. And then machines also, machine belts needed to be made out of leather. So buffalo were a really good source for that. And then of course the geopolitical, militaristic reasoning for knocking them out was because they were a food source for Native Americans, especially the Plains tribes, who put up the most militaristic and strategically difficult resistance against the expansion of the United States. And so the history of the buffalo is essentially one of like them just being shot, and there's as opposed to disease and
so does
climatic,
that mean so does that mean that all of the genetics that you'll be adding are from sort of recent populations that were specifically wiped out by humans, as opposed to from any older material? That's really good to hear, and I am actually genuinely happy to hear that. Thank you.
Yeah, and that's it's a good question, because you say, like, where are these genes coming from? Well, there's just like a plethora of historic samples, whether it's like pelts or bone or any sort of material that is from different bison from the 1800s and before. That's where those genes are coming from. So if you think of it, you have 60 million individuals, and then within 150 years you have fewer than 1,000. So that's so much diversity that's been wiped out. And I'll tell you that today in the United States, the two most diverse herds of bison are in Badlands National Park and Yellowstone National Park. So what happens with that is that the National Park Service actually takes bulls from those herds, because those herds are like considered as the most historically genetically diverse herds. Like those populations within Badlands and Yellowstone National Park, they are from this goes back historically when there were fewer than 1,000 buffalo remaining. Those herds are like the last like wild herds. And another one down in Texas is also like one of the last like herds that stems from a truly wild population. The rest were, rounded up on ranches and then redistributed to state parks and national parks. But so what we actually do today is we take bulls and other individuals from these genetically diverse herds in Badlands and Yellowstone National Parks, and we put them in different state parks. We actually take them and put them in different parks to improve the genetics of buffalo herds around the United States. So what Colossal's doing with the Indigenous Tribal Council, so this is led by the Indigenous Council, which is from the Buffalo Tribal Initiative. So that's the Shoshone tribes, a various myriad of other different tribal groups that are actually leading this effort. So that's organizing where each individuals go, organizing the proliferation of different bison on public and tribal lands. So this bison initiative is essentially ran by tribal groups who were already doing bison, or as they call it, American buffalo reintroduction programs. So that's what this colossal tribal initiative is, and we're merely doing something with bison that is already being done by the National Park Service. And so we're taking those genes, editing embryos in vitro, and then inseminating female bison with more diverse individuals. And so we're just doing what the National Park Service does already, but at a biotechnological level.
Okay, thank you. Also, hi, Warren.
Howdy, howdy. Sorry for dropping in mid-conversation. Just got out of the cave, so appreciate you taking the time.
No worries.
To talk about things.
Yes, absolutely.
How's
Thanks for joining.
Going?
Good. How about yourself?
Good, man. We just discovered this new cave in Tennessee, and
Awesome.
there's these freaking crazy cephalopod fossils in there, and so life is very excellent working on that.
Congrats, man! That sounds awesome.
Yeah, congratulations.
Thanks, brother.
Yeah. Do you want to ask
you guys?
a question? Oh, sorry. Carry on.
Oh, so I actually know very, very little about what's going on with this. I saw that there was some very opinionated people in the chat. And so I was just going to take the opportunity to ask, kind of overarching. I know you guys are going into the de-extinction process. I'd just love to hear kind of your take on what you guys are doing, and I guess why it's so contentious.
Yeah, and I guess one thing I forgot to do in the beginning, I introduced myself, but I wanted to introduce, I guess, my association with Colossal. So initially, I sit on an advisory board for them, and I advise on different matters of content creation and everything, because that's what I do. And I'm also going to soon become an official ambassador for the company, which means that I create. Thank you. Would I create essentially more content, but wanted to focus on the actual conservation aspects of the company, because those aspects seem to be overshadowed in the media by the de-extinction stuff, because the Jurassic Park stuff obviously gets the most coverage, but the company to sort of answer your question of kind of what's overall happening with the company. Colossal Biosciences is a biotech company, so they produce technologies that will eventually be licensed, and that's the business side of it. That's the commercial angle, and the non-commercial goal is to restore biodiversity, and so the company is really a conservation company. They're making conservation tech. We call it de-extinction and genetic modification, but there's actually really a lot more to that. There's assisted reproduction, there's embryology, there is, of course, genetic engineering, there's genomic sequencing, because you got to know what you're doing when you're genetically modifying something. You have to really know what the genes are. You have to know the genomics of these animals, and you have to make sure that you don't have off-target effects, with CRISPR and various genetic editing technologies. So Colossal has acquired various genomic sequencing startups as well to be a part of the company. So that's working strictly with deep learning and machine learning, and being able to sequence genomes and process things that we never would have been doing before. And part of that also stems from one thing I forgot to add for the buffalo, and this is what we were talking about in the beginning, was that they want to be able to create brucellosis resistance in these populations, because brucellosis is a disease that causes stillbirths, and it could also affect cattle as well. And And so it's just a bad thing to have around. That's kind of a big contentious thing within the cattle and bison ranching, is that you can't really have bison near cows because they could have brucellosis or vice versa. So you want to make sure. So there's different aspects that the company's doing for modern conservation. And I think one of the things that this was listed in, I showed a list in the chat of the various conservation things that they're doing. So they're working with the northern white rhino, a partnership with BioRescue, partnerships with Rewild, which are very serious and big conservation organizations. Elephant conservation, working with herpes virus susceptibility, various aspects in conjunction with the Houston Zoo. There's the working with the University of Melbourne for the Quoll project, because there's a big problem with cane toads, invasive toxic cane toads in Australia. And they're working with the northern quoll, which is a little mammal that eats toads generally, but these are toxic. So they're kind of engineering the quoll to be able to eat an invasive species. So there's lots of various, different things like the tooth-billed pigeon, the Sumatran rhino, the vaquita, which is that little porpoise off the coast of Mexico, and the pink pigeon. And there's lots of, various aspects to what they do, which has modern conservation. And I would argue that the modern conservation initiatives and the technology is really going to be attributed towards just the conservation and restoration of species. As much as we like to focus on the quote Jurassic Park stuff, they're really doing this. Technology is going to be used not, of course, just in the biomedical field, but for conservation as a whole.
Super interesting.
Yeah. And one of my initiatives is to publicly make that more known. Because it's always, the de-extinction stuff, of course, gets in the news. So my job is to make sure that the broad modern conservation and biodiversity restoration is known to the public, and that needs to be known prior to something that is coming up. And that's all I could say about
Very
that.
interesting.
Yeah, thank you.
So
That's extremely cool.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Astrid.
Also, hi. Sorry I missed the beginning of this. I got caught up doing something else.
Oh, no worries. This wasn't really even like a meeting, but just an open chat for anybody to talk and answer questions. Because I kind of like to connect, verbally as opposed to just writing in a chat. I think I could articulate things better, or if I say something better, maybe. I don't know if you guys find this too. If you're either tweeting,
Yeah, I hear that.
Absolutely.
You know what I'm saying? Yeah. It's just better to speak about it. But thanks for joining us.
Would someone be so kind as to give me a quick rundown of what you've shared up until this point?
Yeah, I just we talked about Diana asked some questions. I know, Diana, you have a ton of more questions asked, but we just kind of touched on the American Buffalo Project that Colossal is doing. Mm-hmm. So they're doing a partnership with the Tribal Buffalo Initiative, which is ran by a lot of tribes out here in the West. So the Shoshone and Lakota and Hunkpapa tribes are teaming up to do a lot of restoration of buffalo, essentially. So, and Colossal's role is to utilize genetic sequencing and genetic editing to make more diverse populations, because there were 60 million of them 150 years ago, and then it was whittled down to under 1,000 individuals, which is an insane depletion of diversity.
So we're post-bottleneck.
Yeah, so now they bounced back to about 500,000. I would say that maybe less than 100,000 on public land, and then the rest are on ranches. And so the population's growing, but there's still a loss of diversity, from 60 million individuals. So think of all the genes lost in that. But we have those. We have that sequenced from historical samples and pelts and such, and so we can reintroduce this diversity that's lost back into buffalo herds. We do that already by transferring national park bulls who are diverse and we transfer them actually into state parks to amplify the diversity of other buffalo populations. So we already do that, but now we're just doing it in a more effective and faster way through biotech and in, of course, leadership of the tribal organizations. So that's what we were initially talking about. And then I was also just kind of covering overall, like what I do with Colossal. So I'm going to soon be an ambassador for the company. So that means I'll do like more content, more interviews, have full access to the labs and scientists and such. And then, convey publicly the conservation work that the company's doing, because the de-extinction gets all the media, but it really it's a conservation biotech company. And the foundation, they had to create the Colossal Foundation because they were doing so much conservation philanthropy and collaboration. So they had to create the Colossal Foundation with all, given all the governments and really serious conservation orgs they've been working with, to fund projects or to collaborate with them. So it really is a conservation company, and that's what needs to be even more known to the public.
Curiosity. So you guys clearly already have a image in the public domain as like, hey, we're going to turn around and we're going to de-extinctionize, make de-extinct. I don't know, revive the revive a mastodon or something like that.
Yeah.
What's your approach going to be to kind of try and shift that perspective? Because it's just crazy hard to shift something once it's hit the public domain like that.
Yeah, because it's an Apollo program and it's a Manhattan project, and so each of those things carries a lot of philosophical weight to it. Right? It's a huge undertaking. There's so many different ethics involved, and you have to have the right reasons, to do so. And so, to shift the focus as to conservation, I guess you could say the old saying is, walking the walk, right? If you produce results, then the public will then see. And I think the public is going to see that this technology is going to be even more so used for modern conservation, reproducing endangered animals, assisting with governments and other programs. So if we de-extinct an animal, it's really more so the broader, while that's cool, the broader impact is the proliferation and restoration of even modern species. Because that's really what the tech is going to, the primary usage of this technology is going to be used for that, for modern conservation. And I guess to answer your question specifically is like, how are we going to shift the focus? So I understand correctly, is it like, how are we going to shift the focus to modern conservation? Is that your question?
It seemed to me like you guys were doing, a lot of really good work in terms of conservation approaches, and that wasn't being recognized by the public in really the same regard. And so,
so I guess just our goal for that, that's essentially what I'm going to be now doing, is traveling around a lot and making a lot more content about that. Yeah, about all those initiatives, getting those initiatives more well known.
Super cool.
So that's the goal, just to answer your question, like that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to be covering all these different aspects and impactful projects that they're going to be part of, because my goal is to do so prior to something coming next year. And it's very vague, but until I'm going to be, I guess, I have to unfortunately be vague until I can't, although I'm kind of like, about to explode with wanting to, inform everybody. But,
we all know about being vague about scientific bombshells.
I know. It's
really
sometimes utterly unbearable when you have a really cool paper coming out and you can't tell people about it.
Yeah, no, exactly. It's tough, but so that's my plan going forward.
I just want to say I'm actually really glad that you've talked a lot about this conservation stuff, because I was very concerned that it was going to be sort of maybe it still is, I don't know, I haven't heard from a lot of anyone else's conversations, but I was very concerned that it was going to be one of those sort of tech bro companies where they sort of shove on a little bit of like, hey, here's some conservation work we're doing on the side.
Mhm.
But the stuff we're
Right.
actually doing is this, a bit like how established titles would do that, where they would sponsor lots and lots of YouTubers, including very reputable ones. They were a complete scam, but they were doing
Right.
genuine conservation work, and I was kind of worried, especially because of all the concerns that Tyler had brought up, many of which I do share. In particular, the AI art usage of the company. Like, I
Yeah.
saw that a while ago, and I was like, oh, well, I guess this company doesn't really care about the environment then, because why would you use
Yeah.
something with such a huge carbon footprint to advertise yourselves as an environmental company? And maybe that was more of an imaging thing, like them hiring the wrong marketing people or something to do that bit of the website.
Well, I could say that on the AI front, I have multiple times advised them to not do that. I'm
I
like,
really
I'm like, guys,
appreciate that as an artist.
yeah, I've had to like say it with being as respectful as I can when I talk to the marketing people, because I don't want to when I have these meetings, I don't want to be like uh I want to have it be as cordial as possible, but I'm like, we really do not want to do that. And then they're like, well, I know, but there's just a decision that it's to produce a lot of images. They kind of like the style of it, and they like there's other stuff, but then they commission paleo artists as well on top of it. So I was like, hey, Beth Zeiken, who's the artist for Blue Rhino Studio, and she's done so many different great paleo art murals and Scientific American covers, and she's done particularly a lot of big Pleistocene murals. So she's like a really prolific Pleistocene artist. She does all kinds of paleo, but her Pleistocene stuff is like beautiful. And I'm like, you need to get her, contract her to do that. And they're like, oh, well, we actually do already. I'm like, oh, okay, well. I've said my piece. I've advised why, and because they've done a really good job of not being the tech bro company, and they're not. The founder isn't. The head of science is. Oh, so the CEO Ben Lamb and then George Church are the founders, and George is, of course, legendary. He's a legendary synthetic biologist who's the head of the big lab at Harvard, and then another big thing about this is Beth Shapiro. I don't know if you guys know who that is, but he is a renowned paleogenomicist. Has been on Nova and Time magazine, top 100 people. Huge lab at UC Santa Cruz, University of California, Santa Cruz, and paleogenomics lab, world renowned.
Awesome.
Howard Hughes Medical Institute investigator. So in the United States, that's like a big, institution for biomedical research and stuff. She left those positions to be the head of science at Colossal. Okay. The world renowned paleogenomicist, left all those positions, tenured position at the University of California, to be the head of science at Colossal. And that's when I was like, okay, they're serious. So when we have concerns over the legitimacy of if this is even real, I can assure you that it is. That they are not messing around with this stuff. And they're certainly not messing around with the ethics portion. Aside from because I hear the main concern is the AI art, and then
AI stuff.
Forrest Galante, and aside from those, two kind of marketing things, the company
I have
operates.
some much more significant ethics questions on my list of questions, but I don't know if I should get to that or if I should let someone else ask, because I don't want to dominate the conversation too much.
Go ahead.
Actually had another question I'd like to throw out there. So my background, I'm a computer scientist. I focus on AI and machine learning. Earlier, you had mentioned that you have machine learning integrated in part of your guys' research workflow. Where is that being integrated, and is that in-house methods that you're working on, or are you using commercial large language model implementation, or some other kind of implementation?
Well, being that I'm not a computer scientist like yourself, and I think I could definitely point you to somebody who would be able to answer the more technical questions. But from what I understand is that the company has made a couple acquisitions, and I kind of have to pull this up, but they've made a couple acquisitions of bioinformatics companies that are AI based. So where they're implementing AI, besides, of course, generating mid-journey images, but where they're doing like the real AI work is going to be, genomic sequencing, because we're taking very fragmented bits of DNA and being able to reconstruct nuclear and mitochondrial genomes of extinct animals. So that's kind of like where the basis of there is, and I believe that if you want to go to like where they get that, I believe they acquired companies which are now a part of Colossal Biosciences.
If you wouldn't mind, I would love to talk with a couple of your guys' data scientists and AI engineers and whatnot. If you'd be willing to put me in contact, love to follow up on that.
Yes, I'm going to have to, and I'm also keeping all these things here. Kind of taking a note here, because whenever the next time I'll, have a meeting with everybody, I always kind of bring these things up. Whenever I talk to other people in the field, I always make sure to make notes and bring up certain stuff when I talk to the Colossal folks. But yeah, absolutely, I'd love to point you in that direction.
Cheers! Thank you so much.
Yeah, of course.
I have a very mundane and nuts and bolts question as someone being courted by Colossal's ambassador program right now. Which is, do you have a good sense of Colossal is a huge and high budget company.
Yeah.
How tight are the lines of communication between different projects and between different wings of the company? Like, for example, if I were working on a piece of content for them and I was like, I can't comment on this until I get through to the guy who is working on this thylacine thing. Like, how easy is it to get those messages through across disparate parts?
As an ambassador, you'll have full access to all the scientists in the company. Direct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
So that's going to be one thing. What they have told me, at least through the ambassador program, is to have full access. So if you want to talk with the folks in Australia that are working at the thylacine lab, and then if you want to talk to the Mammoth people, or if you want to talk to anyone else in the general paleogenomics organization or anything, or bioinformatics, AI, what I've been told is that we will have access to everybody. And so my direct, contact with the company has been primarily with the marketing department. They'll get me in contact with other, that's kind of like the hub of which I contact people. But with the ambassador program, it's going to be a lot more open. It's going to be essentially direct to anybody.
Thank you. That's quite encouraging and good to know.
Yeah, and I was happy when I heard that too, because I was like, "Oh, cool!"
Yeah,
and that also means full access to the physical facilities as well.
Yeah,
so if
that
you want
is
to
really
go to the
cool.
labs, then we'll do that.
I mean, as a self-taught science communicator, my reputation is kind of hard-earned and jealously guarded. It's like I have to prove every step of the way that I'm capable of rigorously interrogating and critically interrogating information as a non-academic, and I'm really cautious about jeopardizing my reputation by getting associated with something that I might not have the ability to fully understand or investigate. So really totally good to know that it sounds like people are properly in touch.
Yeah, totally fair. Absolutely. No, that's definitely a great approach to have and everything. And I do with that too. I mean, I did do a Temu ad for some shovels and pickaxes one time, but other than that, that's my only guilty association. But no, but all jokes aside, yes, it's definitely something that you have to thoroughly investigate beforehand. And I'm not, as somebody who is in with the company, I don't want to be like, yeah, come on, bro, it's gonna be cool. Yeah, of course, have your own critique of it and everything, and to be skeptical in the beginning, but I believe that once you get more information about the operations, the incentives, the goals and the the different various aspects of the company and its foundation, I think that you'll be more in line with its goals.
Can I ask
Thank
a
you.
question? Oh, sorry.
Yes.
Can I ask a question around the genetic diversity of the mammoths that will be produced? Because, like, surely there's only a limited number of mammoths that you can produce at the start. I'm concerned about, like, how quickly that population might become inbred. How small the gene pool overall will be. And as a result, like, obviously you have a lot of issues with inbreeding, and also
Right.
more disease susceptibility.
Yes, and that was the last herd, right? On Wrangel Island in Siberia was all inbred. From what I know, from what I know, they're definitely not using the genetics from the the Wrangel Island population. Because that would obviously be a terrible basis to start from the last inbred mammoth population. But I believe there's around 60 genomes that the company has officially sequenced. So you'd have 60 individuals that you would start out with, which is pretty decent as far as like. This would have to go into. I'm not, of course, a animal genomicist, and I don't work with the breeding of megafauna or anything, admittedly. But from what I've read, even with breeding large megafauna, there's a certain like number of individuals that you want to start out with. And 60, I believe, is a decent number. But here's the other thing with that is that we have 60 different genomes, and this kind of comes into the computational AI part. And
being able to use a data set like that to turn around and interpolate genetic differences between them, you can start making your own genetic sequences for minor variations for genetic diversity. That's crazy.
Yes. So we could actually create individuals. We could create anyone.
Boy, the ethical considerations of that are horrifying.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's with this great power, I'm quoting Spider-Man here, but it is true, right? With this great power, you obviously have a tremendous responsibility. I mean, that's the case with any new technology. Any new technology could be turned into a weapon that could create unimaginable horrors. But just to technologically answer your question, with the computational advancements that I believe we're making, and I, of course, am not the foremost authority to speak on that particular science, but from what I know, we'll be able to do a lot of interesting things with computational biology to solve genetic diversity issues that you might have. Like, are there going to be diverse enough? What's going to happen with inbreeding? Well, I think that could be solved computationally, from my understanding of their technology.
Okay, can I quickly ask, regarding, like you say, with obviously the whole "with great power comes great responsibility" thing? Something I was wondering, and this question actually came from Bethany. I was hoping she'd be here, and I'm not sure if I'm stealing it or not. But if I am, she can ask again when she gets on. It's sort of a case of like these baby mammoths that are first produced. Presumably, they'll be raised by Asian elephants. Because that's the most genetically sort of close relative to a mammoth that exists now. But these animals aren't in the same genus. They might have radically different behaviors. They might have radically different social structures. They might have different methods of communication. Is there not a significant risk that because there's nothing of the same species as these baby mammoths, that they might become very sort of cognitively isolated and depressed? And it could have a significantly negative, like, is there any way to raise these baby mammoths without risking severe psychological harm to them and preventing them from being able to, live as a mammoth would live?
Mm-hmm. Well, there's kind of like a mixture of the nature versus nurture. Some animals, and I've talked about this with people who are like, if we brought back an extinct reptile or a bird, it's not really like that big of an issue because, well, with I guess maybe not a bird, but with reptiles, they're relatively dumb. Not to put a technical label on it, but with bringing back like a.
Well, that's why I find this.
Yeah, they don't have complex social needs like
with mammals.
Yeah. So with mammals and especially with elephants, I mean, it's so complex. Yes, they have matriarchal, qualities in their herds. We know that's the case with Colombian mammoths, and we also know that's the case with elephants today. And what's kind of interesting is that Asian elephants are actually closer related to mammoths than woolly mammoths. Asian elephants are Elephas are closely related to woolly mammoths than they are to African elephants, Laxodonta, which is kind of an interesting thing. So it kind of like reevaluates, what the elephant, family tree. But with that, we could kind of make, some projections as to what their social qualities were like. There is some guessing, and this falls into the this question would fall into the not only the bioethicists, but there's a bunch of animal behaviorists who are also advisors who sit on an advisory board, who work with African and Asian megafauna and especially elephants. And there's a huge elephant conservation team, that works with Colossal on modern elephant conservations. They'd be more equipped to answer this question, but I believe that there is a protocol in place for that. If you were to have, this baby mammoth that's raised, it would probably have some elephant surrogate parents.
So is there a
surrogate herd?
Yeah. So is there a protocol
then,
in place if the baby mammoth gets rejected by the surrogate herd because it's so different, or if it turns out that the assumptions we made about mammoths having a very similar lifestyle, or about this species of mammoth having a very similar lifestyle to its modern relatives, turn out to be, not the case? Because obviously, like, we can say that based on, phylogenetic bracketing and such, like, Asian elephants and African elephants and Colombian mammoths both have like the very, very similar sort of matriarchal herds. But then if we look at, say, big cats in the same genus have like Panthera, different species have radically different behaviors. And obviously the woolly mammoths were living in a very different environment to a lot of modern any of the modern elephants really. They could have adapted different social behaviors and different social structures in response to their environment that we mistakenly don't prepare them for because we're raising them with the wrong species.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question, and even throughout this, when I answer your guys' questions, I'll have to admit that I'll have to defer you to another authority to properly answer it, because I can't, properly answer it with my expertise, or at least with knowledge. But it's a great question. Are they going to be rejected? Are they going to be accepted? How different are they? And they are all very interesting questions that I suppose we'll find out. And I'm sure that there's a protocol, for that. So let's say, worst case scenario, this baby elephant mammoth calf gets rejected, and Colossal's going to have facilities for them to live in. That's not the plan, but if you were to ask me, like, what would happen with a rejected mammoth? I'm like, well, it would,
because it needs
nurtured.
It needs nurture. It needs to be enriched. It needs to learn all of its survival skills. And an intelligent animal like that needs to socialize, which is what I'm so worried about the first generation in particular. I'm not so much worried later generations, but I am worried about the first generation for that, and how it's even possible to do that ethically with all the questions involved.
Right. And now I guess the best thing that I could answer is that we will have facilities in their native habitat established. So we'll have native, breeding facilities within the Alaskan interior, and possibly Siberia as well, that will act as the staging grounds for such a endeavor. So it won't be like, we make a baby elephant in Texas and then transport it to some random place in the interior of Alaska. Like we'll have, and this is how modern reintroduction, by the way, happens. Like if there's animals that are bred and this happens with mammals too. It of course was big with the San Diego Safari Park and condors, how they raised condors with like puppets of parent California condors, and then eventually release them in the wild very successfully. Now that's a bird, so it's much more different than a proboscidean, an elephant. But
they do much the same thing with takahe here in New Zealand.
Oh yeah, yeah. And
With what now?
Takahe. They're a critically endangered, very large species of rail, which was thought to be extinct and rediscovered in, I believe it was the 1940s. It might have been a bit before that. They only have like one surviving native wild population, but they've been breeding them in captivity and reintroduced them to a bunch of sanctuaries.
That's a cool looking bird. Cool. Thanks for. I didn't know about that.
Yeah, they're flightless. Sorry, yeah, they're a flightless rail. They were present all around Aotearoa and New Zealand, but then they got wiped out because of introduced pests. Interestingly, they actually so there were two populations of takahe on the North Island and the South Island. But we now know they were actually distinct species that were both descended from swamp hens from Australia, which independently became flightless and really large. It's one of the coolest cases of convergent evolution.
Huh. Look at that.
But anyway, that's totally irrelevant to what we're talking about.
Yeah. No, but that's one thing. I mean, even it's down with mammals too. So like when they reintroduce mammals, they have facilities set up, and then you have like an enclosure, but you make it very much like the surrounding native foliage and environment, and then you make an even bigger enclosed area where you would have the species then live in that, and then eventually releasing it to the wild. So there's a protocol along those lines that have for reintroduction. Now, I'm not the specific, expert on that specifically, but it's a good question, and I could point you to the right direction or who to email regarding that.
I just realized we lost Astrid.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe she'll try to connect.
It happens.
Yeah. Can I ask another question, or do you want to ask a question, Lauren?
Sure.
I'm all good. Just enjoying kind of listening in on people's opinions.
Okay.
You go.
And she's back.
Astrid's back.
Hello.
Oh my gosh,
sorry,
so
my
loud.
computer decided to whip out. Oh dear, sorry.
No, that's fine. All good. So I had another question about ethics, if that's okay. I know that you're probably not the person to be asking about ethics.
Yeah.
And really, this is about sort of the legal responsibilities of the company, Colossal, because I've kind of been wondering, like, say we release mammoths into these habitat areas that have been picked out, that seem suitable for them. And let's say that they stray from these habitats, and they start interfering with, human property. They start damaging property, like maybe smashing up into some fences and stuff and causing livestock to escape. Maybe they run into people or people run into them. People go out looking for them for like wildlife photography and stuff. I mean, I am a wildlife photographer outside of all this. There is no way, if I knew that mammoths were in a place I could afford to go to, that I would not want to photograph them.
Right.
Let's say, we have people who are interested in these, and also people that the mammoths might stumble across who were not expecting to see a mammoth, that get severely injured or killed because of these encounters. But those mammoths wouldn't have existed if it weren't for Colossal. Like, isn't there a good legal case to be made then that Colossal is responsible for the deaths of those people or for any damages to property?
Yeah, I mean that would be for the lawyers to figure out. But the one thing that I could say is that they are partnered with, and I would have to kind of bring this up from the website. I believe they're officially partnered with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife, if not the National Park Service. So there's a whole set of guidelines and laws, that we have today with animals. How would we, how we would format the legality of that? But yeah, that's interesting. That's an interesting concept as to like what happens if this thing comes loose and tramples somebody, runs over a car, or what happens when the truly anthropogenic influences in this wild world? What happens when they meet? And that's an interesting question. I mean, I always kind of thought that it would be structured similarly to how different governments have it with modern game, with modern animals, I should say, not just game, but I guess I say game because some wild species are considered by law game, as in like illegally something that you could legally, hunt. And, but then there's wildlife that you can't hunt. And I'd imagine that in the United States, at least, it would be something akin to laws that are similar to South Africa and protected species in the U.S., like the bald eagle.
Yeah, I think there's a significant difference between like an organism that, say, is native to an environment or is known to be introduced in an environment, or like something escaping and getting loose, relative to. I mean, presumably these will be in wild habitats anyway, so there could always be the potential that they might leave that habitat and go into a place where, like, eventually, like where humans are. Like, so I see this as like you've recreated an extinct organism in a place like which could do damage that otherwise wouldn't have been done, in a way that seems very different to, living in a part of say Africa where there are large megafauna.
Yeah, it would be an interesting concept. So this is a sentence that really doesn't make sense, but we as Americans and then Canadians would have new native species, which is a concept that doesn't really, like that sentence is contradicting having been a new native thing. But
actually, the sentence isn't contradictory at all. New Zealand has tons of new native species because we have a whole bunch of, we're relatively close to Australia, so quite often birds fly over here. Sure, yeah. And so in the 1970s, swallows just flew to New Zealand and then established a population, and now swallows are everywhere, and they're considered native.
Yeah, and Colossal just helped release 26 Tasmanian devils back onto the mainland of Australia. So devils haven't been there for 3,000 years. So I guess they're kind of a new native species as well. But yeah, I guess with that concept, when you have subcontinents and islands, close by, there's kind of a new thing. But I guess for North Americans, it's definitely it will be an interesting philosophical and political and national identity thing to navigate. But I imagine the ethics of the legality of the physical nature and physical interactions with the animals will be guided by the United States Fish and Wildlife, who are partnered with Colossal. So again, I would have to defer with that, but it will absolutely present challenges. I mean, challenges that any animal would in our world. You would just be introducing a new animal, so you have the kind of the same challenges that similar animals pose to people who live in the same environment. But yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah. I feel like it's kind of a for lack of a better word, sort of like, it feels like it's going to be a murder lawsuit waiting to happen at some point when someone gets too close to a mammoth that wouldn't have otherwise existed.
Just wait until the short-faced bear is released, and then
good point. Yeah. Is that actually what they're planning?
If I get mauled by a short-faced bear in a cave somewhere, I'm blaming you specifically.
I was going to say, Warren, I think that's how you want to go based on everything I know about you.
Yes.
Look, but hey, how about you'll at least like get a shot on the animal, like a spear, it'll be like mortally wounded, so
experimental archaeology at work.
You'll have a very Cro-Magnon experience with this cave bear.
Yeah, I mean, this does bring to mind, all of those stories about like controversies with predator and carnivore reintroduction.
Right.
Like the part of me that is afraid of wolves in the woods sits in a very, very deep layer in my monkey brain.
Mm-hmm.
It also brings to mind like the reason why the Tasmanian wolf went extinct in the first place.
Right.
That like people were afraid of them, and they were afraid of them taking their livestock, and just uncomfortable living around a large-ish carnivore.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that with the carnivore aspect, well, that's something perhaps that we could dive into in the future.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have a question.
Yeah.
It's just making me think about all of that.
Well, well, let's just say that. Okay, so technically, I haven't signed anything yet, so I would only be telling you my suspicions. Of course, after I sign anything, I can't answer any questions regarding this, but I've been telling everybody this. So I guess I haven't like publicly said it, and it's just my opinion that they have cracked the code per se. And it's my opinion that they could gestate any animal alive or extinct in the Pleistocene in an artificial womb. And I don't mean in 10 years or 5 years.
Crazy.
Hate to drop that ball on you guys, but I've just had a lot of context clues. I mean, some of them are very public clues. Like it's no surprise that they have really done a Manhattan Project with their artificial womb technology in Dallas, and it is very telling that you would have Beth Shapiro, a world-renowned paleogenomicist, become the head of science and leave her tenured positions. Somebody who really doesn't mess around, ethically or professionally. And so those are kind of some very telling signs. I mean, I'm just kind of like dropping hints here, but I think that the technology, I guess this addresses some things that Tyler was talking about in the chat. I think that's where I'm going with this, is that people are saying if this thing is even real at all. And I think that it's more than real. It's world changing. And
Angelus's Blade Runner theme.
I've spoken to people who have taken NDAs on this, and they didn't tell me. They didn't break their NDA. Just to be clear. I guess this is still being. I think this is still being recorded, right, Diana?
Yeah. Sorry. Do you want me? Do you want me to stop recording for a bit?
If you could actually. Yeah,
okay.
if you
I'll
could.
stop recording for now.
Yeah. So what question do you have? Yeah, I remember you had a question coming up, and
okay. Yeah. So the question I was going to ask, it kind of relates to a video Destin did. I think it was a couple of years ago now. But also something that I've noticed Colossal is doing, or is planning to do, according to some of the promotional stuff that I've seen. So basically, I was wondering about the fact that Colossal was apparently planning on trying to bring dodos back. But, I mean, I haven't, it's been a long time since I've seen Destin's video. I can't remember the specifics behind it, but I remember that there was a lot of significant difficulty when it comes to whether or not we even have the technology to bring birds back because of the sort of complicated nature and the differences between something developing in an egg relative to something developing in a womb. And I was wondering if you had any sort of comments or thoughts on that.
Yeah, so one thing about my background too, I guess that this is another aspect, is prior to me kind of diving into the field of paleontology, first to my educational background, as I went to undergrad for ecology and evolutionary biology at the University of California, Merced. And then when COVID happened, I stopped school for a little bit and started working in the private sector of paleontology up in North Dakota. And then I finished up my undergraduate degree, transferred to small school, Valley City State University, just to finish my bachelor's. And so that's my educational background as a bachelor's degree. But prior to that, I had actually worked in the field of assisted reproduction. So this was prior to my beginnings in field and lab paleontology. I was working with assisted reproduction. So whether it was working on projects with Utah State University and a company that I had founded with a couple other people, and we were working with IVF for exotic animals. So that would be any animal that's not livestock, and also livestock animals. And I also did an internship at Hoofstock Genetics in Texas, which works with IVF of cattle and various breeds of cattle and horses. So I have somewhat of a wet lab IVF background to my, which is totally different from paleontology. But so to answer your question specifically, with the difficulties of cloning a bird and versus a mammal, is that what's easy about a bird is that you have the entire, the entire embryo and its birth is just in this little capsule in an egg. And you could even take a fertilized chicken egg and put it in a like a Ziploc bag. I don't know if you've seen this on YouTube or anything, but you could actually take a bird egg. But yeah, you could take a bird and put it into a plastic, like take it out of an egg.
Yeah.
And you could put it in like a little cup and actually incubate a chick to full term, like in a plastic cup. And I guess what I'm saying is that the egg is a very manipulable capsule of which we could, birth. We could hatch a bird from. So that's what's easy. With a mammal, it's difficult because you're obviously having to get embryos and then inseminate the embryos into female, and then those embryos have to take within the uterine wall, and then the animal becomes gestated. The pregnancy, and it's, obviously the pregnancies don't happen all the time, and then there's a risk to the surrogate mother. So there's a lot of challenges on each end. Now, to address your question with the dodo and the bird. So with birds, it's tough because the actual oocyte or the egg, and when I say egg, I mean like the actual cell that we call the egg, not the physical egg that we know of, with the yolk and the shell, but the actual egg that would be, fertilized, or in this case, the manipulated oocyte or embryo is actually very difficult to find. So with a mammal, what I've done, in the IVF industry, so when we breed a cow, we do something called an embryo flush or a oocyte collection. So you actually, physically, and this is something I've done, is where you put your arm up the anus of a cow. Sorry to get detailed here, folks, but in the cattle industry, this is how it's done. Like, this is literally the only way how it's done is you get a big glove and you put your arm up a cow's anus. And then from in that intestinal tract, you could actually feel the ovarian tubes and the uterus, the ovarian tubes, and then the ovaries. And that's actually how we, collect eggs from cows. And then we get an aspirating device that goes through the vagina, and then it connects to the ovaries, and that's how we collect eggs. And then you could actually then get those collected eggs in a media, put it in a petri dish, and then sort the eggs. And then the reason for my long-winded explanation here is this ties into the dodo question. With a mammal, we could find the eggs in a petri dish. It's relatively easy to do. But with in a bird, the oocyte or the egg is resting on top of the yolk. So it's kind of difficult, right? We can't actually take, like a mammal, we could take the oocytes, the eggs, and put them in a dish and find them, right? We have it all lit up. We have a fluorescence microscope or whatever microscope we're using to find the eggs with contrasting lights and everything. But with the yolk, it's very difficult. So that's why bird cloning has been a very difficult thing, because it's literally hard to find the egg in the yolk. if that makes sense. From a embryological. This has been my embryological answer to your question of why it's been like hard. Now with the developments that Colossal's doing, there's various different techniques that they're utilizing, like using different imaging to try to actually locate the oocytes or the eggs within bird eggs, and different things like that to actually find the egg that Colossal is making some advancements, and again, other people could dive into more. The embryologists of Colossal, could dive into that a little bit more detailed. But as far as the dodo reintroduction or the dodo de-extinction project, there's technological advances to do it. From what I've learned, various techniques of finding the actual egg and then manipulating the bird oocyte. If that makes sense.
Yeah, that does. Thank you very much. I will admit that I really wish Destin were here just because he'd done that video on that, and I know he'd have way more questions. But thank you very much for that. And I've actually finished all my questions now because everything else that I had was sort of answered through your discussions of other stuff. So
I'm happy to have answered that, and I apologize for not being able to answer everything, but admittedly, I'm not the expert on all these various things. You'd have a computational biologist and then an embryologist who they have working for the company would obviously be able to dive into much better detail, and maybe there's some things that I accidentally missed or something, but I am happy to have answered all that. And then as more information comes into me in the future, I'll be happy to divulge even more of that. And so like I know in the future I'm going to be briefed on more stuff, and then probably for some period of time after I'm briefed on it, I won't be allowed to talk about it, but then I will. Everything that I learn about the company, I'm sure eventually it all has to be, publicly conveyed to everybody, and that's my goal, is to be a ambassador and a public educator on everything that the company's doing, and I hope that from what you guys could kind of tell from everything that we've talked about, all these various aspects of de-extinction and everything, and the technology behind it. Again, this goes back to the beginning. What I was talking about is that it really is going to be applied for all species. Because now, given all these different difficulties with the technology and different things, but de-extincting species, you can imagine that once that Apollo mission is accomplished, once that big endeavor is accomplished, that milestone, you could see how, benefiting modern species it's going to be tremendous. This technology is going to be amazing for conservation. And to be clear, not of course the main thing. This technology is merely one element of conservation. Conservation is mostly habitat preservation, right? That's kind of the thing, and all the various wildlife partners that Colossal is, partnered with. They that's obviously what they do is to produce. So Colossal isn't the one single answer to conservation. Obviously, that's habitat and climate and everything like that. But it certainly will be a very pinnacle part of conservation going forward in the 21st century.
Hey, thank you again so much for being willing to answer questions and talk a little bit about it. This has been super illuminating, and I've really enjoyed getting to hear about it.
Yeah, absolutely, man. I'm happy to talk to anybody. Honestly, if you guys ever want to message me and have more questions or want to talk, I'm definitely down to do it. Mostly in the afternoons. I prep my fossils, throughout the day, and then I'm usually online in the afternoons and evenings. But yeah, I guess I just wanted to kind of open up a dialogue and connect with people, and and Warren and Astrid, if you guys have any more questions, I'd be happy to answer.
This
or
is
even
kind of
just
a left field question.
yeah,
But,
even whatever you just want to talk about. I just love to talk about anything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So theoretically, we take a mummy, Egyptian, potentially still genetic code intact.
Mm-hmm.
Any Pleistocene animal, does that, I mean, it's mammalian. We going to be able to duplicate somebody's genetic code using the same line of theory, I guess?
So if we take an Egyptian mummy,
Yeah.
would we be able to clone the person, or
basically, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, yes, yeah.
All right.
Technically, I mean, we could clone a person like right now, just with like any people. Like we've been able to clone people for like 30 years, just like how we do with animals today. We do it with so many different livestock and everything. But yeah, I mean, in theory, this any technology really that could be utilized in an animal could be utilized for a human. And
modern technology is wild.
Yeah, but the biggest breakthrough, I don't even say the biggest breakthrough, it's all really a culmination, but artificial womb technology will certainly be very beneficial, but for the medical field as well, because I mean, that's the whole NICU unit at a hospital. So I don't know what it is particularly called in Australia, but in the United States, it's the NICU. I believe that's the acronym for the intensive care unit for a neonatal, for newborns and stuff. Think of all the premature babies that are born. Well, if we were able to have an artificial womb, created.
Yeah, I was just thinking about premature births.
Yeah, absolutely. Because that was being worked on at the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia like 8 years ago or so. They worked on a artificial womb, and they actually successfully, so they C-sectioned a lamb out of a sheep, and then they used the womb to bring the lamb to term, like 4 more weeks from when it was going to initially be born. So they C-sectioned it prematurely, and then put it in the womb, and then it worked. And so that was the last I had heard of artificial womb technology, but from my meetings with the company and also what they publicly said too, they have a really good team of solid people who are working on the artificial womb technology.
Yeah. Back in the early 60s, my grandmother had 2 very premature births, and one of them didn't make it, and the other one was my father. Mm-hmm. So this is important to me.
Yeah. It's important to me as well because I was also a very premature birth. If I had to be C-sectioned, because if I wasn't, both me and my mother would have died. And I was born a month early, and it was pretty touch and go for quite a while. So it's very important to me as well, and I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah, and to go off of that point of how important that impact alone would have on everybody's lives. Even if we're talking about if we are able to de-extinct a full-on Pleistocene species, that would be merely the tip of the profound influence that this company, foundation, and then the technology will have on the world. Like if we're able to actually do it, right, to actually accomplish the seemingly impossible, that honestly is the smallest impact that it would have. The other impacts in the biomedical field and just broadly of modern conservation and stuff would be just, would be the biggest thing that would come out of this, I think. Philosophically and just kind of literally, in the world.
I have to, for selfish reasons, I have to ask about the artificial sperm cell thing. Do you think that is I don't know. I don't even know what my question is. Do you think that that's possible soon, in the works?
I mean, I think it's actually possible now, honestly, because I've seen gametogenesis. If you ever want to research it, that's what it would be called. And with gametogenesis is essentially taking a a gamete, or excuse me, taking a stem cell and then differentiating it into a gamete of some sort, whether it be a sperm or an egg. So that would be the that would be the term. And I mean, I know that's been worked on for years. I know there's been some pretty interesting updates, on that for over the year, not just with Colossal, but just like generally. I've always kind of like seen that either in the news or in the literature. But I believe that, Colossal could certainly do that. They certainly would have the capability of accomplishing something like that.
God, game changer.
Yeah, and that could potentially be a game changer for people like me who are trans as well. Hopefully, we'll see.
Yeah,
like
you can have the artificial womb, and I'll take the lab created sperm cells.
Yeah.
I'll just take the dinosaurs.
And then we can both have biological babies with our wives or
whatever,
or whoever.
I'm still depressingly single, but I mean, honestly, if there was some way to use my stem cells to create eggs and an artificial womb, that would be freaking awesome. I don't know if that's something they're working on. It probably seems a bit out of scope, but it doesn't seem as impossible.
Yeah, nothing that I think any of the tech that they're working on is sort of also going to be designed to be licensed for any other biomedical human function. That makes sense. So you could imagine that if we can, fully sequence nuclear and mitochondrial genomes for an American lion, and then being able to create different individuals genetically from that. Now you could imagine the profound biomedical genetic engineering that would have for diseases.
Yeah,
it would be that's really what a lot of the profound changes I think will come in that form. And one of this is kind of something, and I told this to Colossal. Last week we had a meeting. I was like, one thing to hammer home is that, so when we, as like kind of paleo natural history nerds, we love Jurassic Park, but then we always like to be like, well, actually, and like talk about all the, the inaccuracies, right, of Jurassic Park, whether it's the inaccuracies of the science, although the lab stuff is actually kind of like true. If you like rewatch it, it's like kind of like to a dot. Just the thing is that, we don't have obviously dinosaur DNA, and then there's a lot more discoveries that we've made since, that has, changed our perception of dinosaurs. But anyway, so you could take all the inaccuracies of Jurassic Park, like of how real life is different than the movie. But I think the most profound difference or inaccuracy in Jurassic Park is that the company doing the de-extinction was doing it for some silly reason, like to sell theme park tickets. That was like the reason why they brought dinosaurs back, was to make a park and then sell merch and tickets, which is kind of funny to think about, because in real life, the company,
nerds are not like that.
Yeah. In real life, the company would be doing it for intrinsically valuable reasons.
Yeah.
It wouldn't just be like this willy-nilly, like, oh, I had a dream and I owned a flea circus and I want dinosaurs to be real. And it's much more valuable to that. And the mission is, as they've stated publicly, is to solve the biodiversity crisis. That's it. Because we're in a crisis currently. Like, we're in a free fall.
Yeah.
Biodiversity.
You can really see that when I'm here I am in New Zealand, and the most common birds that we see here are all introduced ones, and we've because of humans introducing basically every invasive pest imaginable, from possums to rats to cats, to the country. We now have such a tiny number of native birds that compared with what we used to, and you'll go through the native forest and there's 4 or 5 common species, and then that's it. And you consider that this place was a land effectively ruled by birds only until a few hundred years ago. And it really is just stark and striking. And similarly, both the UK and New Zealand, I see this whenever you walk through the countryside, I feel this extreme sort of despair walking through what used to be all these different native habitat types, and now just seeing fields with livestock and
Right.
no habitat for anything.
Right. And with the crazy changes that we're seeing with that, where we have forests and now we have, fields. But yes, the UK is notorious for that. Like the bucolic UK countryside is really just, people. I mean, I know Devin Nash has talked about this, or in the UK, like they look at all the farms, like, isn't this beautiful? It's like, well, it's not. You destroyed all the awesome bogs and forests.
Yeah.
It used to be what the UK was, but now this is unnatural. But anyway, with all these changes, that you highlight, we're going to need with drastic changes comes drastic measures to be able to combat that change.
Yeah, I was going to say this. I mean, there's absolutely an ethical case to be made that our original intervention was radical. Perhaps now is not the time to suddenly have qualms about radical intervention.
Exactly. Intended consequences of that nature. Like, we owe it to ourselves. We have our technology, whether it's been war or anything else, or industry, has led to drastic changes that have led to a lot of destruction of the environment. But we owe it to ourselves ethically, with our technological capability that we possess, to restore it.
Yeah.
Just as much as we've damaged it. That's kind of like one of the main big cases that the bioethicists of the company have stated, is that's kind of that is the idea. That's the mission of the company, essentially.
Yeah, and I think there are some
I need to hop off for the evening.
Sorry.
Thank you very much for the talk today. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
It's great talking with y'all. I hope to do so soon. Have a good one.
Hey, Warren, thanks, man.
Warren.
You too.
Thanks.
Cheers.
See you, Warren.
Hi. I'll need to head off in a bit too. I just want to ask. I just wanted to add like a little something regarding all of this, because I will say you've actually really alleviated a lot of my fears and concerns about the company. I do kind of wish Tyler was here, just because I know he would have pushed back on so much, and I feel like we've got a lot.
I really wanted him to be on. Yeah.
I wanted him to be on. I'm so sad he wasn't. I'm also quite sad that Beth wasn't as well, because I know she's very skeptical. And she wasn't here, so I'm a bit sad about that.
Mhm.
But
I love the. Go ahead. Sorry, go ahead.
No, but I was just going to say, there are some habitats where I think if Colossal is as legit as you believe, and I really hope it is, then there are some entire habitats that I think if we're going to be able to conserve and restore them properly, there are some species that we just need to bring back. Like in New Zealand, for example, moa were the main grazer. And now,
I was just about to bring this up.
yeah. And now, coastal herb fields, they are a very threatened, very rare habitat that you get around bases of cliffs and things. Low-growing vegetation that lives right by the seashore, made up of halophytes, but not salt marsh, like in sea spray zones. Really unique plant communities, and they basically only exist now because introduced rabbits and sheep basically just do that grazing that moa used to do. And if we remove exotic grazers, which we're trying to do, then all of a sudden you erase that habitat and you potentially drive some really threatened plants to extinction. So I think the only way you can really do this is to bring back moa, which is not something I've really seen Colossal talk about. Maybe it is something, but it's something I'd love to see them do and prioritize.
It's definitely on the from what I know, it's kind of definitely on the radar. I know it hasn't been a public announcement, but I have heard from the various interviews and podcasts that people of the company have done, that it has been something that's been brought up. But I guess at this moment they aren't publicly saying that that they are going to do it. But it certainly would be a next project as far as reintroducing an extinct native bird to an island, which would have a very direct and effect on the island. And again, it's not like a major mammalian megafauna that you run into problems, as we kind of discussed before. If you have all the various aspects and issues in a society that you'd have with elephants reintroduced, but with a bird, it could be not as societally, or there won't be a lot of societal conflict with it. It'll be a pretty kind of welcome thing first off, and it'd be ecologically it would be great.
Well, there's emus on the Chatham Islands now, and sort of slightly naturalized in a couple of spots in New Zealand that were introduced, and people are wondering, could they be replace moa as a potential sort of analog? But they seem to feed on different stuff.
They just seem to do different things.
But they don't seem to have really had any conflict with humans, which is positive.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean that. With the birds, we have more of an idea of the conflict level with that, and I think that definitely, the moa would be an amazing introduction. I mean, let's put it this way too. When we kind of think about this, with when we think of de-extinction, we're sort of focused on the Pleistocene, big stuff. But I mean, you're talking everything that lived, right? Up from now until thousands of years ago. So that means everything that's been written about, and some bird or something that went extinct in the 1500s or something. So not only just the dodo and the thylacine and the moa, but the elephant bird too. The giant lemur on Madagascar. You have so many different animals that are now within the scope of being reintroduced into environments that haven't really changed that much, since their extinction.
I will say,
I'm sure an ecologist would rebuttal that. But
I don't know. I do worry about the the habitats that are suitable for mammoths changing as a result of climate change, and how sort of long that can go on for. But I think
in that
time here.
Yeah, that paper I linked in the Patreon chat. I believe it covers. So that was published and open source published by a lot of the Colossal Advisors and Ben Lamb, the CEO, and George Church, the founders. So that was published by them, and that kind of assesses the habitat for mammoths based off of the foliage that we know for certain that they ate, and where that still exists. And I believe they project it as well going forward, climatically, for climate change, where would they be able to live?
Yeah.
And that's one element that they could live going forward. Assuming, of course, the path of climatic change continues and we don't do a single thing to stop it. But the goal is,
based on the person who just became the American president, I'm kind of scared about that.
Yeah.
Well, sir, I'll talk to him. Don't worry about it. No, I'm just kidding. I do not actually have a direct line to Trump. Although I have a direct line to somebody who has a direct line to Trump. So I don't know. We'll see. And that's not a political connection, by the way, just to be clear. But it is just happens to be a connection.
I know where my MP back in the UK lives, so if he does anything bad, I know where I can set his house on fire. But I'm not going to do that. Thank you.
I mean, it was great connecting with you.
Yeah, same. I've learned a lot from this conversation. I think my viewers will find it really interesting. I really appreciate you doing this. And I am going to need to head off.
Really?
Because I need to finish filming the first half of my next video, because I have promised my viewers it will be out next week, and God knows if that's actually going to happen.
What a mood.
Yeah, I feel so bad because it's been over 2 months since I made a video now, because I had to move cities and everything's been a complete disaster. Oh well.
I understand. Been there.
Yeah. Well, cheerio and lovely to chat.
Yeah.
Bye.
Yeah, nice hearing from you, Diana.
I hope you enjoyed this discussion. I'm sorry that it was obviously extremely long, but I hope that you learnt from it. And if you have more questions, I will pose them to Harrison, and maybe we can get a follow-up discussion to address the rest of your questions. In any case, I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you very much for watching, and if you did enjoy this video, feel free to like, subscribe, share, and if you're interested in the kind of work I do, hello, I'm DJ King. This is Geoduck Geoscience. It's a channel where we discuss paleontology, geology, pseudoscience, and do debunks of pseudoscience, and just have a good time with education. In the next video, we're going to be doing a massive debunk of the pseudoscience of Jordan Peterson. I have almost finished that video now. I'm just waiting for some quotes from some YouTubers. In the meantime, I'm going to be posting some other videos as well. So I hope you enjoy those, and I will see you all soon if you want to stay. Thank you very much.